So today's title of the sermon is called Refocusing. And as you can see, our liturgical arts ministry team has given us many visuals to think about having clear vision, binoculars, these wonderful glasses, which I tried to put on, but it's wrought iron, magnifying glass, and of course, a telescope. And Angela said this was here because it's going to be a stellar sermon. All right, we're a little slow on the uptake this morning. I don't know why lately, but I've been taking to starting my sermons with a question, if you've noticed over the last number of weeks. So I'll begin with a question again today. Actually, two questions. You ready? What's 2 plus 2? All right, that's the first question. Second, what's 25 times 32? Something, right? All right, so did you notice how your brain did different things? When I said 2 plus 2, did you really even have to think about it? But when I said, what's 25 times 32, did you have to think about it? Are you still thinking about it? So, a man named Daniel Kahneman writes a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. He's actually a behavioral economist. And he calls fast thinking System 1 thinking. System 1 thinking is fast, intuitive, and completely unreflected. Or it's things that we do automatically or have learned so that we do them as if we're not even thinking about them. Just like you did when I said, what's 2 plus 2? You just reacted. System 2 thinking, this is all how the brain works. System 2 thinking is slow thinking. The brain works more slowly, more deliberatively. The brain goes into analytical mode. Now, Kahneman says the problem is that in System 2 thinking is lazy and sometimes just rationalizes whatever System 1 comes up with. Are you with me so far? I know it's a little scientific, but try to stay with me here. System 1 also is really not aware. And System 1 also generates stories, but System 2 thinking is aware. The problem is, if System 1 thinking is endorsed by System 2 thinking, because System 2 thinking can be lazy, then those initial thoughts become beliefs and opinions. Okay, you're starting to see where I'm going with this, aren't you? Good, because I have no idea where I'm going, so I'm glad you do. Basically, Kahneman is talking about why we're all so contradictory at times, which we are. We're contradictory in our thinking. System 1 thinking and System 2 thinking and how those interplay is one of those reasons. But what I want to do today is talk about System 1 thinking and System 2 thinking in terms of how we see people, or we don't see them. So let's move from science and psychology to the scripture for a moment. Today we heard the story of Stephen, another interesting character from the early church's scrapbook called Acts. And in this text we see really the beginning of the institution of deacons, the diaconate. The deacons were formed because widows were being neglected. They were not being seen. So they divided the labor, right? Okay, here's the people that are anointed to preach and teach the word. Here are the people that are anointed and called to serve in different ways, to be in charge of the food pantry. And Stephen, by all accounts, is full of grace and power, and he is chosen. And though he was a deacon and a famous one, he actually goes on to preach the longest sermon recorded in the book of Acts. Now, that sermon would actually lead him to his martyrdom. But that's another complicated story that we don't have time for today. Stephen starts doing signs and wonders, and he begins to be attacked and criticized. So just as an aside, I want us to think about for a moment, what is it in our human nature? What is that compulsion to attack goodness? Think about it. Mahatma Gandhi, MLK. What is it? Jesus. Oh yeah, I forgot that one. Jesus. What is it in our nature that makes us, and we all do it, want to criticize and attack goodness? We want to be suspicious of it. So it was as then now, but they set up false witnesses. They spread fake news. They stirred up the people into such a fury was created that they brought him before the council, which was the supreme judicial authority of that time in Jerusalem. Yet when he goes before the council, what happens? They look at him and they saw him. They saw that his face was like the face of an angel. They saw him. They went from system 1 thinking to troublemaker to system 2 thinking of experiencing him, actually looking at him and reflecting on who this man was. They saw somehow what drove him. They saw him anew. Are you with me so far? So I think that during the pandemic, we had space and time to kind of refocus. The pandemic brought into sharp relief people that we often don't see. People that in system 1 thinking are more transactional and utilitarian almost. All of a sudden, tell me this didn't happen to you. If you were able to go out and go to the grocery store, did you not have more appreciation for the grocery clerk and cashier than you ever did before? Or the bus driver, or the nursing home aide, or your mail deliverer. Maybe your block was like mine, who took an offering up to do something special for the mail carrier as a thank you for showing up. Somehow we saw people that we hadn't seen before as essential. I'm a little worried that now that we're starting perhaps to ease or to get a little bit on the other side of this, I know we have a ways to go and we still don't know the future, but things are more, quote unquote, back to how they were. I'm afraid that we're going to lose focus and forget to look at people. Tell me, after being online for months and months and months, over a year, then more than a year, and then that it didn't do something to your heart to see somebody in person. Right? Did you see him differently? The pandemic helped us refocus. I think what I'm saying today is I want us to take what we learned from that focusing and bring it forward in our everyday lives now and integrate it into the ways that we see each other. We also refocused during the pandemic because we saw with our own eyes the death of George Floyd. We witnessed that. And that made many people see things differently, did it not? It was a catalyst because George Floyd was seen and his murder was witnessed. And I've been doing quite a bit of reading lately on trauma and also the interplay of trauma and racism, generational trauma. And what I've learned from a number of different writers is that there are really three types of violence. There's direct violence, just like it sounds, when an individual or a group of people enact violence on the body of someone else. That's one kind of violence. The second kind of violence is structural violence. Those collective structures that have led to inequities, led to poverty, the inequality of health care, education, of democratic participation. Structural violence, which enacts trauma on people. But it's the third kind of violence that has captured my imagination since I first heard of it a month ago. And they said it is attentional violence. A-T-T, attention. Attentional violence. Not seeing another person, not seeing their highest future possibility and potential is a type of violence. That it is actually trauma-producing when over time you are not seen or someone is not seen in their full humanity. You can see it in our educational system, which is basically a caste system in this country. You can see it in our healthcare system. You can see it in our housing system. Anybody with me, or am I out here by myself? Attentional violence. I had never thought of it that way. That it does violence to people not to see them. Sometimes I wonder, when I see people who are unhoused or people who are living on the street, I wonder which came first. And many of them have a struggle with mental illness. We know that our whole society, right? We just need to name that mental illness impacts. There's not a person sitting in this room or listening online who hasn't been impacted in some way in their own life by mental illness. But I wonder, when I see people so marginalized living on the street, I wonder what came first. That they lost housing because of the structural violence, perhaps? But then they became so traumatized once they were on the street because they have not been seen day after day after day. So I guess what I really want to say today is that I believe when it comes to seeing people, making the journey from system one, my immediate response, which is informed by culture, by our own socioeconomic standing, which is informed by things we have heard, which is informed by media images. To go from system one thinking to system two thinking, I want to suggest that that is a spiritual journey that we are called to be on. It takes awareness, and it takes an opening of our hearts, and it takes a presencing rather than an absencing. A presencing to show up and to look someone in the eye. To take the time to see them in their entirety, not in some category. To be willing to go beyond our preconceived ideas and our initial reactions shaped in us by so many things. From troublemaker to face of an angel. From criminal, a human being with worth and dignity. Open heart, open mind, open will. Drew Lanham is a poet, an author, and a wildlife biologist. He's also the alumni distinguished professor at Clemson University and an ornithologist. The way he talks about birds is sacred. It gives me goosebumps the way he talks about birds, and I'm not even a big bird fan, because he sees them. And sometimes people have asked him, is that how you can see human beings too? And he says it like this. There's so much that's simple out there that appears simple, but that's really complex. It's sort of like the sparrow, he says, that appears brown from far away and hard to identify. But if you take the time to get to know that sparrow, then you'll see all of these hues. You see 5, 6, 7 shades of brown and all these things on the bird at first glance that just appear to be brown, but that are actually yellow and gray and black and white. And so in taking that time to delve into not just what that bird is, but who that bird is, and to understand, he says, and this is what I love, to understand, to get from some egg in a nest to where it is, to grace you with its presence, that it's taken for this bird trials and tribulations and escaping all kinds of hazards. Don't you love that? And, he says, I try to think about people as much as I can in that way. That each of us has had these struggles from nest to where we have flown now, and the journeys that we're on. So friends, my invitation first to myself and then to you is to go beyond that 2 + 2 = 4. And to be able to do the hard, lengthier work of 25 times 32. And to really see people. To refocus our sights. To be present. That we might more often see in the face of people the face of an angel. The face of God. That we might be a reflection of what we want to receive. There's not one of us in this room. There's not one of us listening online that doesn't want and need at the very basic level of who we are to be seen. And at the end of the day, I want to be famous. I want to be famous in the way a pulley is famous or a buttonhole, not because it did anything spectacular, but because it never forgot what it could do. And I want to be famous so that I never forget why I am here. And that is to connect, to see people, to be in deep relationship, and to be a reflection of that which I desire to receive. Let's take that spiritual journey each day. Amen. I'm going to have Leslie come up for our special music today.
Cada día es por eso que te alabo, es por eso que te sirvo, es por eso que te doy todo mi amor, es por Es por eso que te sirvo, es por eso que te doy todo mi amor. Es por eso que te alabo, es por eso que te sirvo, es por eso que te doy todo mi amor. Oh, your love for me, it's sweeter than honey, and your mercy is new every day. Oh, your love for me, it's sweeter than honey, and your mercy is new every day. That is why we come to praise you. That is why we want to serve you. That is why we give you all our love. That is why we come to praise you. That is why we want to serve you. That is why